It was supposed to be just another peaceful morning on my ranch, birds chirping, dogs barking playfully, and me sipping hot coffee in my rocking chair while watching the sun stretch over the distant hills. Then I heard my neighbor screaming. Not out of pain. Not fear. But the kind of entitled shriek only one woman in the entire HOA could produce, Karen. I stood up, narrowed my eyes across the field, and there she was, ripping my American flag off the pole I'd personally installed in front of my late father's memorial statue. The same flag he carried into battle. The same flag I took with me through 2 deployments in Afghanistan. And the same flag I'd raised every year on Veterans Day with pride. She had the audacity to yank it down like it was a cheap curtain. Then she tossed it onto the dirt, huffed and screamed, "This is not regulation. You're in violation. This isn't a military base." I was stunned. For a few seconds I couldn't even move. But then, she lit a match. I dropped my coffee mug. The flag, my flag, caught fire. Smoke started curling up into the bright blue sky as the stars and stripes blackened and shriveled. "No!" I roared and bolted toward the gate. But it was too late. She smirked. She actually smirked. "I told you," she snapped. "The HOA doesn't allow offensive displays." That's when I pulled out my phone. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I whispered as I hit record and captured everything. What she didn't know. That flag wasn't just a piece of cloth to me. It was a symbol of brotherhood, honor, and sacrifice. And the moment she lit that flame, she declared war on something far bigger than she could imagine. And now, the military brotherhood is coming. My name is Ethan Briggs. I'm a retired Marine Corps gunnery sergeant, 45 years old, and I live on a peaceful ranch just outside a small American town that recently became part of a new HOA development. I bought this place 5 years ago with the hopes of starting over after my service. I've got my dogs, my horses, my land, and enough space to breathe. I never asked for trouble. But trouble? Well, it moved in 2 years ago wearing a sun hat, fake pearls, and a shrill attitude named Karen Pickering. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the HOA. She didn't just enforce the rules, she made them up. No barking dogs after 7 p.m.? That was her. No flags unless they were HOA approved? Also her. No outdoor furniture that wasn't beige or taupe. You guessed it, Karen. She came knocking the very first week I moved in, asking me if I could take down my giant military billboard. By that, she meant my 6-foot pole with the American flag. I politely explained it was installed legally and had a permit. She didn't care. Her nose crinkled like she'd smelled roadkill. "It's aggressive," she told me. "It scares people. It's not neighborly." But I didn't take it down. In fact, I upgraded the pole and added solar-powered lights so it would shine proudly at night. Every few weeks she'd come by, file another complaint, or post another passive-aggressive letter on my gate. Sometimes she'd take pictures and say she was documenting non-compliance. I ignored her. Until today. Today, she crossed a line that you don't ever cross. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't I confront her earlier? Why didn't I report her to the HOA board? Well, here's the thing, she asked the board. Literally. The president. And she handpicked every member who votes along with her. So any complaint I filed ended up in the trash, or worse, used as ammo against me. Last Christmas, she fined me $500 because I hung a military-themed wreath on my door that had red, white, and blue ribbons. On Memorial Day, she had my driveway blocked off because parade traffic might cause grass damage. But this time she didn't just fine me. She didn't just issue a notice. She destroyed my father's legacy. After the flag burned, she left like nothing happened. I stood there staring at the ashes, my fists clenched so tight they bled. My dogs howled in confusion like they could sense my pain. I knew I had to do something bigger than just arguing with her. So I made 3 calls. To my lawyer. Because I was going to sue. To my congressman. Because destroying a veteran's flag was a federal offense under the Flag Protection Act. And I had video. And most importantly, I called Red Iron Brotherhood, a group of retired military veterans who had my back since my first tour. These weren't just old friends. These were men and women who had stared down death beside me. And now, they were ready to return the favor. The next morning, I woke up to 15 motorcycles parked outside my gate, engines roaring like thunder. Men and women in leather jackets bearing the Red Iron Brotherhood patch, skull, wings, and crossed rifles. Some had prosthetic limbs. Others had scars. All had steel in their eyes. They stood in formation. One of them stepped forward, Big Mike, a Navy SEAL with a beard thick enough to house wildlife. He looked me dead in the eye. "She burned your flag?" he asked quietly. I nodded. His jaw tightened. Then we stand. Just then we heard it again. Karen's voice. Those motorcycles are in violation. They're not allowed on HOA roads. She had the nerve to walk up to our group, alone, holding a clipboard and yelling about fines and infractions like we were a bunch of school kids breaking rules. Big Mike stepped forward and said something that made everyone freeze. Lady, you didn't just mess with a flag. You messed with a family. Karen laughed, until two black SUVs pulled up. She turned. And who are they? The door opened. Out stepped a decorated army general. Karen's face turned white. He saluted me, then turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, you've just violated federal code. And now, the military is watching." Karen's mouth hung open, stunned and speechless for the first time in her tyrannical HOA career. The Army General, General Brooks, a towering man with silver hair, crisp metals and a no-nonsense glare, stood like a wall of authority beside my gate, flanked by two military aides in uniform. It was like the entire atmosphere around us shifted. "You can't bring the army into this. This is private property," Karen shrieked, waving her clipboard like it had magical powers. General Brooks didn't even blink. "Ma'am, you desecrated a United States flag that was flown under federal protections. That's not just HOA business. That's our business." Karen stumbled back. Now here's the twist. This wasn't just a random military stunt. General Brooks was my late father's best friend. They served together back in the day, and after I sent the video of what happened, he didn't just send a reply, he came in person. Karen tried to retreat, her high heels slipping in the gravel. "I didn't know. It was just a piece of cloth. You can't seriously arrest me." But what she didn't know was that the video had already gone viral overnight. While she was asleep in her gated HOA community house, I had uploaded the clip to my social media with a single caption. "She burned my veteran father's flag. Now she's about to learn what brotherhood means." Within hours, veterans groups, military pages, and even national news stations had picked it up. By morning it had over 3 million views and people were furious. Comments flooded in. "This is a hate crime against veterans. Get her arrested. We'll fly out and support you, brother. Just say the word." So while Karen was fumbling with her HOA rulebook, the world was watching. But before the authorities could officially act, Karen did something no one saw coming. She ran. She dashed back into her SUV, slammed the door, and sped off down the dirt road like a banshee, tires screeching, dust flying in every direction. The crowd stood in silence for a moment, then Big Mike growled, "Should have cuffed her when we had the chance." But the general raised his hand. "She's not going far. We've got people watching every HOA property she's connected to." That's when the sheriff pulled up. Sheriff Jody, a tall, no-nonsense woman who knew me from town, stepped out and tipped her hat. "Got a bolo out on Karen. Reckless driving. Destruction of property. And yes, desecration of the U.S. flag. Are you pressing charges?" I looked down at the ashes of the flag still smoldering in the gravel. My father's name is engraved on the memorial plate beside it. My hand clenched into a fist. I'm pressing everything. Back at the ranch, the Red Iron Brotherhood wasn't just standing around. They were organizing. They set up camp, tents, supplies, and even a makeshift honor wall where veterans from all over were beginning to send patches, letters, and flags to stand in place of the one Karen destroyed. Each one carried a name, a memory, a sacrifice. We called it the Brotherhood Wall. Within 48 hours, over 200 veterans arrived. Some in wheelchairs. Some holding folded flags. All in solidarity. One man, a Korean War veteran in his 80s, saluted me and said, "I took a bullet for that flag. You're not alone, son." Meanwhile, Karen was still missing. Reporters swarmed the HOA headquarters, and the rest of the board quickly began distancing themselves. They released a public statement. "The actions of HOA President Karen Pickering do not reflect our values or policies. An emergency board meeting has been scheduled to review her behavior." But it was too late. Karen's face was everywhere. News, Facebook, Twitter, even military forums. Some people even started calling her Flag Burner Karen online. A few veterans across the country began organizing local marches in honor of the fallen. Flags were raised. Names were spoken. And Karen? Still hadn't returned. That night, I was standing by the Brotherhood Wall, placing a new flag when I heard the familiar sound of an engine rolling up my gravel driveway. Lights off. Tires crunching slowly. I froze. The Brotherhood moved in quietly, forming a line behind me. Big Mike cocked his head. "That's her." The SUV rolled to a stop. Out stepped Karen, and two unknown men in suits. She looked disheveled, makeup smeared, her voice weak. "This has gone too far," she croaked. "You people are threatening me. I've had to move twice in 2 days. My life is in danger." One of the men stepped forward. "We're Karen's legal counsel. She's prepared to apologize." I raised my hand to silence the crowd. She turned toward me, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry for burning the flag. I wasn't thinking. It was a mistake. I'll pay for it. Just, please call them off." I stepped forward slowly. "No." Her eyes widened. What do you mean, no?" I pointed to the ashes. "You can't unburn a flag. You can't erase dishonor. You don't get to walk away from this because it got uncomfortable." Suddenly, Sheriff Jody stepped out from behind the tents. "You're not walking away at all." She slapped handcuffs on Karen before she could scream again. "You're under arrest. Let's go." And just like that, Karen was driven off in the back of a cruiser. But this wasn't the end. Because one of her lawyers stayed behind and handed me a folder. Inside were documents that made my blood boil. Karen had plans to remove the entire Brotherhood wall and repurpose my ranch land for an HOA golf course expansion. She had already submitted fake signatures and altered zoning permits. This wasn't just about a flag anymore. This was war. You'd think someone like Karen would know when to quit. She'd been arrested, exposed on national television, banned from my ranch by federal order, and abandoned by her own HOA board. But no, Karen wasn't wired like the rest of us. She didn't just flee to hide. She fled to start over. And this time she wasn't targeting a single veteran. She was going after an entire town. It started with a phone call from Big Mike, 2 weeks after her disappearance. "You sitting down, Ethan?" he asked. "I'm in the barn with the horses." "Well, drop the hay. She's popped back up." He sent me a screenshot, a grainy airport photo of Karen, dark sunglasses, scarf over her head, and a bag that had "Sunrise Estates, coming soon," printed on the side that I nearly dropped my phone. Sunrise Estates wasn't just any development. It was a retired veterans housing project in Prescott, Arizona. It was meant to provide affordable, low-maintenance homes to elderly servicemen and women. And somehow, Karen had wormed her way into the founding board. We got on a video call that night. The Brotherhood team gathered around a table, laptops open, maps pinned to a wall behind us. Samantha Reed joined too. She had sources already digging into Karen's aliases and bank trail. "She's registered there under the name Kathleen Pickard," Samantha reported. "She filed incorporation papers 3 days after skipping town. Used a private lawyer and paid everything in cash." "How's that even possible?" I asked. "Money laundering through fake consulting firms," she replied. "Classic HOA grift behavior." And then came the kicker. She's already planning her first public event. She's calling it a fresh start, a community kickoff, and it's happening this weekend. We had 2 choices. Let her continue her scam and hurt more veterans, or show up and shut it down ourselves. We chose the latter. We flew out in a convoy, 10 Brotherhood members plus Samantha and her crew, landing in Arizona a day before the event. We stayed in a small motel just outside town, blending in. Mike called in a few favors. Local veterans, former Marines who lived in Prescott and had heard whispers about the development. One of them, Leo Thomas, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet with a cane and an attitude sharper than barbed wire, agreed to help. "She thinks this is just a sleepy town full of old men," Leo said, chuckling. "Let's show her we still know how to organize." The day of the event. Karen, or rather Kathleen, stood at the front of the Sunrise Estates clubhouse in a beige dress suit, handing out glossy brochures. I stood across the street with a cap pulled low and sunglasses on. Mike was beside me. Samantha had her camera rolling from a nearby van. "Thank you all for coming," Karen said through a handheld mic. "This is about building a peaceful, rule-respecting, unified community." I couldn't help but scoff. The same woman who had set fire to a veteran flag was now pretending to be a guardian of unity. We waited. Let her dig her hole deeper. Then, right as she lifted the mic to announce her plans for HOA-controlled patrol routes and community code enforcement teams, I walked forward. The crowd murmured. Karen's smile faltered when she spotted me. I pulled off my cap and sunglasses. "Gasp. You?" she barked. I stepped onto the clubhouse stage. "Afternoon, folks. Sorry to crash the party. Just wanted to ask this woman a few questions." Security tried to intercept me, but Leo and Mike stepped in, flashing press badges and military IDs. Samantha's crew followed with their cameras, and the crowd immediately split. "I know her," someone whispered. "That's the HOA lady from the news." That's the flag burner. Karen's mic trembled in her hands. Security, remove them, she snapped. But they didn't move. Because Samantha, still filming, announced loud enough for everyone to hear. We're here to report on a known HOA fraudster who fled criminal charges across state lines. We have receipts. And the Department of Justice has been notified. Karen's face went chalk white. But we weren't done. I turned to the crowd. She tried to seize my land. Destroyed my father's memorial. Lit a flag on fire. And now she wants to control your homes, your families, your peace. Murmurs turned to shouts. What? That's her? She almost scammed my cousin. I saw the video. That's the same woman. Karen backed up toward the building. But Leo wasn't letting her escape. He limped forward, pointed his cane like a sword and growled, "You came to the wrong town, lady. We're too old to care what rules you think you've got. We've seen combat. We've buried friends. And we don't lose to people like you." Police arrived minutes later. Karen tried her usual tricks. "I'm being harassed. They're unstable veterans. This is a setup." But Samantha had already emailed the police department the evidence packet. Fraud documents, previous arrest footage, and the leaked recording from her first scandal. Karen was arrested. Again. This time on federal fraud charges. Because her fake companies, money laundering, and across-state impersonation attempts weren't just HOA violations. They were federal crimes. Back at the motel that night, we sat around a fire pit. No suits. No cameras. Just a bunch of brothers and sisters in arms, laughing, telling old stories, eating greasy burgers. Leo raised a glass of iced tea. "To the Brotherhood," he said. We all lifted ours. "To the ones who can't be here," I added. "And to those who think they can burn a flag and not face the consequences." Karen was extradited to face multiple charges across multiple states. The FBI confirmed she'd created over 6 fake HOA organizations in the last 8 years. Veteran groups rallied across the country, demanding federal oversight of HOAs to prevent abuse. And my ranch? Still standing. Still free. Still flying the flag she tried to destroy, but couldn't. Just when we thought it was over, when the judge slammed the gavel and federal charges were finally underway, the unthinkable happened. Karen escaped. Yes, again. The news broke like wildfire. Former HOA president and alleged serial fraudster escapes U.S. Marshal custody en route to court appearance in Nevada. It was all over the headlines. Samantha Reed ran a special report that same hour. Social media exploded. The hashtag #CatchKaren started trending globally. But me? I wasn't shocked. Because I knew Karen. And Karen always had a backup plan. Let's rewind 72 hours earlier. Karen had been transferred to a federal holding facility in Nevada for processing. During a routine court transport, she claimed she needed medical attention. She began hyperventilating, clutching her chest, claiming heart palpitations. The officers, following protocol, pulled over and requested emergency medical aid. The ambulance arrived. And that's when she vanished. She swapped places with the EMT. Yes, you read that right. The EMT was on her payroll. They wheeled her out, covered in a blanket, unconscious. When they loaded the stretcher, she sat up, tossed the marshal with a hidden stun device, and disappeared with the ambulance into traffic. By the time backup arrived, the vehicle was abandoned behind a gas station. Karen was gone. Again. When I got the call from Big Mike, I was sitting on my porch in Texas, sipping coffee and scratching my dog behind the ears. He didn't mince words. She escaped, Ethan. Feds are panicking. I stood up so fast, I nearly knocked over the chair. You're kidding. I wish I was. But guess what else, he added. We think we know where she's going. Mike had access to a group called Shadow Trail, veterans trained in private security and intelligence. They picked up a burner phone signal linked to Karen's last known alias. The location? The Florida Keys. A private dock. A rented catamaran. A one-way ocean exit. She was planning to flee the country. That's when the Brotherhood mobilized one last time. 3 hours later, we were on a flight to Miami. This wasn't a raid. It wasn't an ambush. This was a surgical strike. We arrived just before dawn. The marina was quiet. The waves gentle. It was the kind of place tourists come to forget life's chaos. Karen thought she'd blend in here. But she didn't count on 24 veterans blending in even better. We had eyes on every dock, every entrance, every boat leaving the inlet. Then at 5:43 a.m. she arrived. Dressed in a sun hat, sunglasses, and holding a fake passport. She was 10 feet away from freedom. Until she heard a voice behind her. Going somewhere, Karen? She turned slowly. It was me. I stepped out from behind a fuel pump, arms crossed. She gasped. You? How are you here? Big Mike stepped up from the other side. We're everywhere, Karen. That's what you don't get. Suddenly she reached into her bag, pulling out a small spray canister. Pepper spray? Taser? Didn't matter. Before she could aim, a veteran named Rosa, a retired Air Force sergeant and self-defense instructor, disarmed her with one swift motion, flipping Karen to the dock. Samantha popped out from behind a charter shack with a camera. Smile for the internet. Karen screamed. This is illegal. This is vigilante. That's when the U.S. Marshals pulled up in boats, lights flashing. And this time? They cuffed her with leg chains. No more ambulances, Karen, the lead marshal said coldly. You're going away for real. Karen was placed in maximum federal custody awaiting trial for fraud, property theft, identity theft, conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and aiding a federal fugitive operation. Her bail? Denied. Permanently. Samantha's full docuseries, Flagged, the Karen who took on the military, aired on national TV and streaming platforms. It became a viral hit, 35 million views in 2 weeks. Veterans across the country were honored for their service and activism. Congress even passed a new bill nicknamed the Karen Act, Karen, keep associations from repeating exploitation nationwide, aimed at regulating abusive HOA power structures. And me? I rebuilt the flagpole. Stronger, taller, brighter. At the base we added a plaque. In honor of every voice that said, not on my watch. 6 months had passed since Karen was captured in the Florida Keys. 6 long healing months. The nightmare stopped. The court hearings ended. And the dust? It finally settled. But the memory of everything that happened, it never left us. The betrayal. The fire. The escape. The fight. And the Brotherhood? We came out stronger. Let me take you to the day everything came full circle. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind that makes you forget storms ever happened. The ranch was dressed in full color, red, white, and blue. A massive canopy tent stretched across the field, covering rows of folding chairs, a portable stage, and tables filled with food brought by neighbors from 3 towns over. People weren't here for a barbecue. They were here for a ceremony. The Brotherhood Wall was becoming a national monument. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, with support from private donors, designated my ranch's memorial wall as a historic veteran advocacy site. A permanent landmark to remind America that no one burns a flag and walks away from it unscathed, not under our watch. Senator Laura McKnight gave a speech. General Brooks stood at attention. Samantha Reed was there too, now the proud recipient of a National Journalism Award. And then it was my turn to speak. I stepped onto the stage and looked out at the crowd. Over 600 veterans, their families, and supporters were present. I saw Big Mike in the front row, arms crossed like a proud older brother. Rosa had tears in her eyes. Even Leo flew in from Arizona with his cane and his attitude. And behind them? The flag. Tall, bold, illuminated, rising over the memorial like a lighthouse in a storm. I took a breath. My name is Ethan Briggs, I began. And I've fought in places many of you have never heard of. I've seen men fall beside me. I've carried friends on stretchers. I've slept under tarps and held the line when there was no one else left to do it. But never in my life did I think I'd have to fight a war, right here at home. Not with guns or tanks, but with loss, with lies, with someone who thought power meant control. She tried to rip away my father's memory. She tried to erase every name this wall represents. And she thought because she had a title, she could get away with it. I paused, looked straight into the camera. But what she didn't count on was us. The crowd erupted in applause. Some people cried. Others stood silently, hats over their hearts. And then we unveiled the final piece. A bronze statue. It was modeled after a folded American flag held by 2 hands, one gloved in military fabric, the other wrinkled with age. Beneath it, engraved in steel, "We are the wall. We don't back down." As for Karen, she was tried in federal court on 7 counts of felony fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. The evidence was airtight. The testimonies are devastating. Her own HOA board turned on her. She was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, no parole. In court she tried to make one last speech. Something about how her intentions were misunderstood. That she never meant for it to go that far. But when she looked into the audience and saw rows of veterans in uniform, all staring back in silence, she choked. Her voice cracked. Her lawyer spoke instead. And she left the courtroom in silence. Karen's scandal sparked a national review of HOA policies across the U.S. New laws were passed to protect property owners, especially veterans and seniors. The Karen Act became a template in over 18 states. And me? I went back to ranching. I still wake up at dawn. Still feed my dogs. Still polish the boots I wore during my second deployment. But now, every morning before the sun rises fully, I do something first. I walk to the base of the memorial wall. I look up, and I salute. Because that flag still flies.